So many ideas going on in this project, but it's just the start.
Good design is all about creating that moment of bliss.
This is really also the hospitality and the tourism of tomorrow.
This is what we want to show.
We have created something which blends into the environment, and the house itself is basically seamless.
Imagine you were able to just teletransport.
You are on your own island in the center of Amsterdam.
I think you have to go there to believe it.
We're now looking at the only UK category winner in the completed buildings section of our awards this year. So congratulations to Allford Hall, Monaghan Morris on the mixed use winner, which is the Post building in London. And over to AHMM for the presentation.
Thank you, Paul. I realise I have 10 minutes. This is the Post building in London. It was a post building, a machine for moving posts around in the pre-email era. It was a magnificent double height set of factory floors stacked upon each other. We looked at it for the client. It was trapped in a financial problem for 10 or 12 years. We looked at it about a decade ago and started thinking about how this building could be recycled. On seeing it, I was struck by the scale of the 1 acre floor plates and wanted to preserve but enhance the building. It's in a historical part of London, St Giles, right in the middle of a place called Holborn, which was part of Dickens' Rookeries. It's a part of an ancient, well, at least 100-year-old idea of moving the mail around in an underground network around London, popping up in these multi-level factories. And there is the rail station that remains in operation and is a preserved piece of infrastructure for future use. It's a machine, a machine of a building. And these are the original diagrams of the mechanization. So it really was a kind of factory in the middle of town. We looked at a number of ideas for making that factory and considered it as a flat iron linked to its 1930s neighbor. We looked at this idea of the unique scale of this building that's only matched in central London by one small floor of the Magnificent Economist. We also looked at this idea about layering the building, a stack of related but differentiated floors. And these are our facade studies with this idea of retained frame and these super scaled windows, making the building inhabitable for the future. These windows change scale onto High Holborn, where we also incorporated 21 social housing units. So the scheme becomes retail, offices, roof gardens, and housing. We are very intrigued about making an architecture from this scale, and then this idea of refinement and echoing the kind of idea of the building as a machine. On the left is the original volume, on the right is an early study of super scale windows looking in. Here's a collage we made as part of the design process, and an early drawing of this idea of creating a public garden on top of the building, one for the residents, one for the people of London, and two more for those who work there. These are the early studies on the left of the office building, on the right of the office and residential coming together with a series of winter gardens, so Portland stone-clad social housing. Here you see it in the city, so it's an ambitious structure rising through 9 floors above ground with 2 retained floors below ground. It has a magnificent engagement with Hawksmoor's Church, Saanich House, the roof of Foster's British Museum, and is famous from Hogarth's engraving in Gin Lane. This is the social housing, early study of it, and this idea of high quality interior apartments, affordable, as part of a mixed use development. These are the study models, the stepped form. We remove the upper floors, but retain the lower floors. And an early sketch of the fact that our new core, there had been no vertical transport because the building was really for moving post, not people, would bridge over the railway structure below. And this is an early collage of that idea of the core as a building within it, a kinetic glazed element within the building. And we began to think of the building in a sense as a doll's house with these huge picture windows from the street. It became a place of raves and parties, including our own 25th anniversary party on the right. And then we started to kind of market the building with the client. Importantly, it got taken by McKinsey's and the Nationwide Bank. So during the construction process, it was pre-let in an uncertain time, in an uncertain part of London. And here you see it. And we had this idea of roof gardens for the public, for the people who live there, and for the workers, connected views and stepped terraces. And these become part of a place of play and a place of work. So we kept 5 stories of the building, 2 below ground, 3 above, and rebuilt the upper floors. Here on the left, you can see the scale of the large windows that I was talking about, almost unique within this part of London. On the right, the residential. Then this idea of linings and interiors. And on the right, you can see our glazed kinetic core. The new structure of exposed steel plates celebrating the retention, and the old elements that we kept in a yard to bring back the building as pieces of art within it. Here you see the structure being cut to allow the new structure to come through, and this collage of old and new with Arabs. And there on the left you can see how that sketch of the core as a vertical bridge spanning over. And then on the right you can see this kind of architecture of capitals developed as new and old structure meet. And then the celebration of the exposure of the services, and then the refinement of the interiors, thinking of bathrooms more as a club. And then working with an artist, we developed the idea for a jacquard mill woolen backdrop to the lobby based on a picture we had and Uccello's Hunt in the Forest. These are early studies of this collaboration, this abstraction of the picture. Then here you see the magnificent double height floor plates as they were let to be occupied. Here you see the process of construction, and here you see the completed building, the residents of the social housing, the ground floor plan onto the quiet museum street, wrapped in retail, then the upper floor of a typical office with mezzanines emerging through as a form on the roof with 6 levels of roof garden. And here you see a glimpse as a new object tying into the history of the city and London, importantly here from Smirke's British Museum, addressing and deforming the box to address the corner. And here you see the import of that corner to London. And then this is the corner of Holborn and Museum Street, where we created a new public space. Then you see it engaged with its 1930s neighbour as one complete flat iron. Then here you see the detail of the building and the shifting scale and the refinement of the stainless steel overlay onto the lacquered steel sheets. And then this idea of the residential and the scale shift with the Portland stone framed in a similar vein, but shifting scales throughout. And then the point of detailed engagement at ground with the retail. And then the detail of the making of the building and its shadow and its relief. There is, of course, the frame is buried within this architecture that cantilevers beyond. Then the subtle curve onto Museum Street. Then here you see the building inhabited. Obviously, cycling with 1,000 spaces is the most important transport system in central London. Then here you see how the tenants have taken on, this is McKinsey's office, how they've then taken on and used these volumes. And then this interestingly references the amphitheatre idea that we were suggesting in our early design ideas. So this idea of the architecture of the building helping to define a future architecture of a yet unknown interior that can be endlessly adapted from here on. Here you see the roof terraces, stepping down, the public garden on multiple levels, and then the building by night, which becomes its own kind of active piece of city life. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and a very rich mix, appropriately enough. I'm going to ask Abdelkader to kick us off with a comment and a question.
Very interesting project design and thoughts about what we saw now, and I want to understand exactly how the building is used during the day and during the night. Is there any difference, and how many times do we use the building, and how many times the building is empty, etc., and how it deals if there is a thought about that. But I want also to say that I really appreciate, and it's amazing the way you give more space and more light, and the way also you deal with the gardens on the roof. So if you can help us to understand how we use the building during the day, just every building have a time of using.
Yeah, this building is busy 18 hours per day. At ground floor, it's busy as retail. So there's the entrance hall, and there's gyms, bars, and restaurants at ground that also go to lower ground, where we're reusing the old foundations and the volume of the factory. Then the 8 floors above are used as offices by McKinsey, who are pretty much a global organization, so they use pretty much 24/7. This is their kind of European base. And then the floors you see here are occupied by Nationwide Bank in a more traditional working day pattern. The 21 affordable apartments are obviously occupied as residences come and go throughout the day. The roof garden is during daylight hours for the public, but the roof garden for the office workers is used by the office workers 24/7, as McKinsey is a 24/7 organization. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Christina.
Hi, Simon. Nice to see you.
Hi.
Wonderful project. I live in a post office, so also in London, so it's sort of it's quite nice to see these buildings being reused. Mine became a theatre, and then it became a home. There is this. It was very difficult to see a lot of the images because we see such a small screen, and there were quite a few images. But from the things that I picked up, one of the things about these building types is, as you pointed out, the industrial nature of what you inherit, and it's something that you seem to have celebrated, just as I've celebrated it in my own home. And you keep talking about the Flatiron building. I guess are you referring to the Flatiron building in New York? We see a lot of steel in the facades and beautiful detailing. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit more on that, the aesthetic of the industrial building, and how that informed your facade design or any of the design components?
We inherited a wonderful steel and concrete structure, which we wanted to keep, particularly because of its volumes, because no one will build 6-meter high floors in London today. They would rather squeeze extra floors in. So that 1 acre floor plate we hugely enjoyed. There was no vertical transport system at all, because there was 2 staircases and no lifts, and it was all about moving goods through it. So we had to insert a new building within the building that we conceived as a glazed enclosure, a core within it, a new steel bridge that was necessary because we have to bridge over the live railway lines. So we saw the building as very much a structure, a mechanism for allowing inhabitation, really picking up on its history. We then were interested in old and new structure coming together, working with Arabs on the retention, but rebuilding the upper floors that were unstable, they were too light. So we were very interested in this idea of actually the steel becoming the interior of the architecture. We liked the idea that the interior would be designed by the system through which it was made, rather than one that was lined out. So the environmental system and the structural system come together in the interior to make the setting for the life of the inhabitants to come. On the outside, we had a challenge because our frame is sometimes 1 or 2 meters back from the building, and we're cantilevering out to the street. So there was no architecture. It's almost the opposite of another London obsession, which is to retain a historical facade. Here we were retaining a useful structure, but the facade was long past any value and had no particular merit. So we had to invent an architecture that had no logic of structure, which to me was an interesting challenge, a freedom that was quite difficult. We then developed this idea of the super window, which is 5 meters by 5 meters, opening at the lowest level. So there's this completely huge scale shift in the project, which is not really apparent when you see it in the street, but the mock-up, which I'm moving back through to here, gives you an idea of that scale. And then we like the idea of bringing the art of the occupation into bear in key areas like the reception and the toilets. And then this idea of expressing a refinement by overlaying a kind of string course of stainless steel to bring a craft and scale that referenced some of the underground railway techniques. So it's a private reference, but it was about developing an architectural language of skin where the skin itself became a structure.
Thank you very much. Nuno.
Very beautiful project. It's this kind of this discussion of the mixed use. Some programs are like sometimes difficult to mix together. The funny thing is that also still in this discussion of the affordable housing in the center of London, I think it's still quite fresh, that discussion. I feel that the most challenging program to mix on this building will be the social housing, the affordable housing. Was that a difficulty, or where does the decision come to have affordable housing in this building, which I think price per square meter for facade is quite high? Where does the decision come from? From the client side or from the city hall?
So the city's requirement is that your uplift on, so there's an existing building with existing area, sui generis, we establish the use of office. And as we rebuilt the upper floors, we end up with more area. Of that uplift, at least half the uplift of area, so say we get 40,000 feet, of that 40,000, 20,000 must become housing. Actually, it was 40,000 must become housing. The normal policy would be to find a donor site nearby and build housing. The normal policy in highly valuable central London would be to find a donor site nearby, build the private housing, and then build some social housing further away. Our decision as design team with our client was to make a different kind of offer to the city. So what we said was, we will not build any private housing. We will give you the money for the private housing, and then you can use it to subsidize the rent on the public housing. And we will build affordable housing only and embed it on the site. So there will be no donor site, and the housing, as you can see on the left-hand side, and the offices will come together as one piece, which is pretty unique in central London. And they are very expensive facades, and that's actually part of the joy of the project, that you're actually celebrating the life of ordinary working Londoners next to the offices of ordinary working Londoners, all in an arrangement that's highly unusual, not really done. It was an imaginative leap of the brief management taken by the client and the design team as a way of making a more attractive mixed-use building.
Yeah,
thank you. Final quick question from Kim.
Yeah, I really like the idea. Very professional, by the way, presentation, and I'm sure you are very good at convincing clients about what to do. You answer very well on all the questions. I really like your idea about the mixed use, to put everything together like it was actually in the old days. I have a quick question here. I see how the facade and everything comes out. If I pass by the building, I might have thought that this building has been there for a long time. How did you want to connect to the site, and how did you want for the facade to appear? You can see what it came out to, but what's your ideas working on it when you worked on it? Also with the mixed use, the different kinds of uses in the building.
Yeah, the facade had to be lightweight. So like many facades in modern buildings, it had to come on a low loader from a facade workshop. It couldn't carry brick. This part of London is a collage across time, and you will find buildings from the last 500 years to the present day. The building we're looking at now is not part of our project. It's a 1930s building. We were interested in this idea of a scale shift. We were interested in the idea of self-finished materials. So there's no powder coating or treatment. It's lacquered steel and polished stainless steel coming together in an abstraction, because the facade was an abstraction because there was no frame to express. We were also interested in this idea of detail coming in an entirely private discussion with an underground railway that the public, some know of, but no one sees. And we like this idea of the refined string course giving scale, as it does in the Palazzo Strozzi or in the Judd apartment in New York. And that idea of making and constructing and designing facades as a design project was of import to us. We then like the idea of shifting scales and expressing the residential floors at 3.2 meters, and the office floors are much bigger, 6.5. And we like the idea of the two systems coming together, being tied together by these wrinkles, and then the social housing actually having the most elegant of the finishes, which is a roach bed Portland stone that reveals its fossils, laid in a vertical pattern, so you are kind of aware of its non-load bearing role. So to us, it became an essay in constructing a facade, because we are overlaying onto an existing building, and that is a design project that we hugely enjoyed as a challenge. If I'm making a new building, I'm much more likely to be looking for the architecture of structure to define the facade. But here you can see it's the architecture of detail in a free facade, but expressing the two different programs and how they might come together. And of course, the history
and we must stop
of
it.
Hawksmoor's Playful Church. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Congratulations on winning the mixed use category, and thank you for your time today.
My pleasure. Thank you very much. Nice to see you all.